Welcome. I'm Egypt Burge, your self-care specialist and host of the Nourish Your Soul online retreat. Today's featured guest is Shelley Klammer. Shelley is an expressive artist who teaches people to express their repressed emotions through their artwork. So Shelley uses art as a means to help heal trauma and various emotions. She uses journaling.
Journaling, narrative therapy, phototherapy. What else? A lot of writing, a lot of different kinds of art. Collage is a specialty because it's easy for people. And painting, drawing, really like what you would call expressive arts, a wide range of things. Yeah. Anything you can do online.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
So, Shelley, thank you first for being here and joining us. And I know that you started out as an artist, but can you tell a little bit more about how you got into using art as a means to help people with healing?
Sure. Yes, I did start out as a professional artist, and I had my work in galleries, and I was very concerned about how things looked. And I went through a personal crisis where there was a lot of deaths in my family, for 5 in a year. And it just blasted my world open, where all of a sudden who I thought I wasn't who I was. I saw that the marriage that I was in was wrong for me, and I left my marriage, and I had a little baby daughter, and I fell in love with my new life partner, and I moved away from my sort of city of origin, and I started this whole new creative life. But in the process, because I'd sort of left this, I had a vision of how creative my life could be, but when I actually sort of had to take that into practice, all of my fears came up, and so I experienced a lot of fear and worry, especially around making a living, really, in my 30s. And so I started to turn inward with my art, where I stopped showing it. I pulled it out of the gallery, and I started to do a lot of expressive journaling, and I did an intense amount of self-reflection through daily journal writing, and I started to draw, and I started to paint more expressively, and express my emotions. And then I felt sort of healed and whole enough to want to take my art to others. So I started to teach it in my communities, and I got a job in healthcare facilitating art. And so I ended up working for the past 10 years, really, in healthcare full-time in different health authorities, and I taught art to kids in jail. And so I really shared what I learned in an experiential way. I took it out into the world, and that's how I made my living. So, yeah.
Awesome story.
Yeah.
Started, like you said, with some serious trauma and tragedy, it sounds like.
Yes.
And then you were able to use, what you did for a living as a way to heal yourself.
Yeah. Well, the neat thing about trauma, as you know, as a therapist, is that sometimes it opens you up to more a transcendent kind of vision of what your life can be like. So you live your life in this little box where you think you're this person who you were kind of told to be growing up in school and family and church or whatever, whoever told you who you had to be, that you sort of live that, right? Most of us do in our 20s. And when I was in such incredible grief and shift and change and trauma, I had this vision of this whole amazing creative life, but it took a while to get there because I had to sort of clear out a lot of the fear and conditioning that I had standing in the way of that beautiful vision I had for my life.
Yeah. And like you said, worry is what came up for you a lot, the worry and fear,
Yes.
even behind making a living. But it seemed as though once it did the healing process, went through the healing, and then continue to do some work, that you actually opened up even more doors for yourself, and now you're doing what you love to do and sharing it with other people.
Yeah, well, that's true. I think a lot of us worry. I think a lot of us are. I mean, our whole world really. We're kind of. It's changing, thank goodness. But we are steeped in scarcity consciousness, that Puritan work ethic, like work really hard for your money, and so you get these like visionary ideas, and you think, well, how can that work? I've never seen that anywhere in the world, and that doesn't make sense. But it's those very ideas that kind of can lift you out of worry if you follow them step by step by step by step. They do take you out of that scarcity consciousness. But I think it's that conflict for women who are visionary or entrepreneurial. They get these ideas about what they feel they should do, but somehow they don't see quite exactly how it's being done by other people, perhaps, like in its specificity, like the very specific way, because we all have this very unique way of bringing something into the world. And if it's fresh and new, it's very hard to believe in it in a way. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I can, yeah. So because a lot of times we're looking for a path to follow. It's one that's
Yeah.
already been formed, but sometimes we have to create our own.
Well, this is it, right? So when I had I would call it a spiritual opening during my trauma, all this new information came in, and I saw this amazingly beautiful creative life. But yes, I didn't see a mirror of anyone else doing it. And so that's what I started to fall back on my doubt and my fear and my worry. And I think that's why I created so much art in my 30s, was because the art would lift me up out of that worry. Like it would take me back into that transcendent place. Because
Mm.
whenever we create spontaneously, it lifts us up out of our normal thinking patterns, and new things come in, right? So um, I was I create art every day, so it always keeps me higher. And even if um, patterns or struggles come up in the spontaneous art, it's like as if I can see them from a higher place. I'm not so in it. So the spontaneous creativity, which is what I deem as expressive art and writing, it does two things. It shows us the patterns that sort of stand in the way of those visions that we have for our life, and it also helps us visually see those visions. We get inspiration coming in through the artwork, and we're like, okay, and then we can look at it, and it's almost like a mirror, really, that we're looking for. We can see that mirror of those higher possibilities in artwork, rather than maybe family or friends that don't believe in us or believe in what we're doing or even understand what we're doing. It comes through the art instead. So,
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I'm thinking in my mind that I think I shared with you before that I am a late bloomer when it comes to creativity and art. And so can't, I didn't have that experience of actually using art as a way to transcend or to really open up my get to the core of my emotions. So to watch you talk about it is just amazing because I see your face lighting up and you just seem like it just really has taken you to a new level.
Yeah, it takes me to a new level, and it also, I guess I could say it reminds me of who I am, I suppose. Like right now I'm doing, I do a daily creative practice every day. And every year I explore something different. And I've explored mandalas before, but I brought my mandala journal. And so every day I, make a mandala. And I use it to relax and calm down, because that's my goal this year. This is my first year not working full time. And I've found it really, really challenging to learn how to relax, because I'm sure you can relate, being a mom. And I know you work as a therapist, and you've got this private practice that's coming up the pike, and you've got all these things going on. And this has been the first time in 10 years that I've actually not worked full time, run a private practice on the side. And now my daughter's 21 and off to college. So um, I've actually had to sort of train myself to learn how to relax again, because when we're working so hard, like even though I've had lots of inspiration coming in, um, I've been super scheduled and super busy and super like very, very tight about it. Like I get home from work and I'm sure you know what I mean. Get home and it's like, okay, I've got an hour to write this and then I got to make dinner and do all these things. And so one thing when I was reflecting on talking to you, it was really so good for me to reflect on this sort of self-care theme that you were talking about, is that I've actually had to train myself to work, like I was saying to you, more inspired than tired, because I think for so many years, I can look back now and I think I've wasted a lot of time working tired. Which is kind of like in a way, kind of a masculine way of working where you're just like pushing through. And I remember reading something in my 20s, and it was a book written by a man. It was a business book. And he had said, you can work way past tired. And I kind of took that as my motto to kind of overcome this scarcity consciousness and this fear and this, oh, can I make a living? Can I do this? Can I actually do it? And I actually, looking back, think I worked way harder than I needed to. Like, they say work smart. And, I pushed myself to work too late into the night. I pushed myself to work too long past when I was tired. And at that point, you're just kind of going in circles, you're just like muddled and can't think straight, when really, looking back, had I, like even now when I'm really struggling with, I'm finishing up a lot of writing. I've written about 15 e-courses and I've been finishing up all those projects this year. Even now, I forget sometimes to just like go for a 1 or 2 hour walk and come back and be inspired, or have a nap, which is hard to do when you're working full time. But even still, there's ways that, you can shift your energy or your attention, or go grab a cup of tea, or go rest, or even just do a task that doesn't feel hard. So that's been a real learning experience for me, having come from, you can work way past tired, to like, well, how about just be inspired and have those beautiful ideas come into your body, and then just work from those beautiful ideas instead of just push,
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. And like you said, there are so many, I can think of other sayings that I've heard, over the years, that encourage us to just keep going, keep pushing, and you're referring to that as a masculine way of thinking?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
But with the working inspired and not tired, because to be honest, like you said, as the day goes on and you're constantly working, by the end of it all, you lose focus and clarity, and you almost don't even enjoy what you're doing anymore.
Yeah. And, and what are you bringing? I mean, I worked in a very structured environment. I was working in healthcare in an art studio, and I was working with very elderly people, veterans, Canadian veterans. And so there's a certain amount of structure to any kind of, care service, as you know, right? There's deadlines, and you've got to be here at this time and there at that time. But even then, I was starting to flow and realize that there was areas, anytime I was pushing myself too hard, there was always like this little way that I could just maybe work in this way instead, like maybe sit and talk to somebody quietly, or hold their hand when I'm just, at the computer, and I'm just like, just trying to find that flow, that work style that kind of flows, so that the inspiration can, number one, come in, and number two, you can follow it with the inspired action. And so this has been my training this last year, being at home, because I'm like, every morning, like, oh my God, I can't believe I don't have to go to work. I don't have to commute, It's so strange. It's been so strange. But just getting the sort of like lifting that pressure off of my shoulders, and how it's so interesting, because I think as visionary women, we can get a lot of visions coming in from above, from spirit, from our guides, angels, God, whatever you believe in. And I often say to people, working full time and doing the private practice, I really ignored my body quite a lot because I was loving all the inspirations that came in, but in a way you can also be used by the muse. And one thing that a lot of women have been telling me this past year is, yes, it's one thing to draw in the inspiration, but it's another thing to ground it onto this earth and be abundant with it. And many, many women, many spiritual teachers, many creative women have told me that the energy coming up from the mother, from the feminine, from the earth, is what brings those visions into abundance. And so when you're working hard and tired, we're often forgetting to maybe put our bare feet in the grass or to take a break or to sit on the earth and remember that those visions have to ground onto this earth. And we have to do that. So the energy has to come in. And so, yes, I've been very inspired and written a ton and done a ton. But part of not being tired for me has been this past year, just walking and swimming and sitting on the ground and allowing that. When one dear teacher said to me, just put your back against a tree, and feel that energy and feel those ideas coming to earth. And then that's when you get the good ideas about how to implement them and how to work inspired instead of tired. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. And it sounds, I would love to be able to just go out. A lot of times I find myself inside of a building all day long, which is miserable for me. I know that I need the sun. I know that I need to feel, even if it's a cloudy day, I need fresh air or something. So I have to, that's one thing that if I don't get it, it makes for a long day.
It does. And I can tell you, I've told this story before, but I mean, I worked in a gorgeous art studio. The funding was cut last year. That's why I'm not there anymore. And also my private practice is burgeoning, which is good. So all good timing. But the thing is like, it just about killed me as a deeply feminine, creative woman. Even though the art studio was beautiful, it was still within 4 concrete walls, and I had to be there from 8:30 to 4:30, Monday to Friday, and it was so hard. So yeah, just bringing in practices to ground and to. I often took my lunch hours on my own and got outside and did my creative practices outside so I could just feel myself, Yeah.
Right. So can you talk a little bit more about how we can use art as a means for self-care?
Yeah. Well, like I say, I am a huge fan of creative practice, and not as like work hard at something and you have to do this every day. But I think I almost specialize in creating really simple creative practices for busy people because I had to do that. So I have lots of different practices on my site, like meditating on one magazine picture a day. I have a really simple phototherapy class. I have a narrative therapy where it's just one little prompt and write a little tiny story. Like even just those little teeny tiny little windows into inspiration, and into sort of, or I guess out of the sort of the ordinary self that we get so mired in those 4 concrete walls at work, even just having a little bit of that, because I myself needed that. Like I said, I felt a bit trapped in that structure. And so even having like 1 year, I try to choose something sort of every year or until I fill up a journal, right? So 1 year I was just like, I didn't have any time and I was tired. My daughter was little. I just would pick a magazine picture that like I would look in the morning before I left. I'd glue it in a journal and I'd meditated on it all day, like not knowing like, why does that cracked wall in that monastery draw my attention? And it would just kind of take me out of the ordinary enough for me to just feel like that day was just that sort of little bit more inspiring, or just outside of the box that I was living and working in. And then I would go home and I would write a poem about that image. And so that was one practice, and many more. Like I I've done tons of collages, and I got really into drawing and doodling. And so there's lots of different ways, but I think it is, like we said earlier, not just a process of releasing, because number one, we just need a tool for release, and whatever that is. Like some people run or swim or go to yoga. For me, I release through artwork, and I just feel better. I just like, I don't know. I just started, doodling and putting, colors together, and
Oh.
I stare at it, and it helps me. It helps. It's like a release, right?
Mhm.
And then some are mandalas are more releasing, and some are more inspiring. But whatever needs to happen that day will happen. And so, yes, I guess just a dual purpose for how art would support is the spontaneous art making is just releasing and calming, which mandalas, that's my focus. I'm really trying to calm my nervous system
Mhm.
for good out of scarcity consciousness this year. This is my goal with the mandalas. It's like a meditation practice for me. So, different kinds of artwork can have different kinds of goals, like I have different stages of self-expression. Like, if you really, really need to release, collage is great for that. Putting together a spontaneous collage, because what you don't understand about your unconscious mind will come through the pictures and the words. If you don't have time, there's just, I don't know, I just could go on and on. There's inspirational practices, there's releasing practices, there's contemplation practices. It just depends where you are in your journey and what you need for your practice right now.
Okay. So
Yeah.
what do you think that some of the blocks are that people have with expressing themselves like in a artistic way?
Oh, that's an awesome question. Well, I can tell you that that's why I started teaching collage, was because as you know, in school, we're all taught that we have to be good and we have to be able to draw a particular way, and otherwise don't bother, and that's why these late bloomers such as yourself come along, because we're traumatized. And I can't tell you how many, I started out, I got so fired up about spontaneous art, and I started out teaching spontaneous painting, which in the end I found people found it really, really traumatizing and very hard to do. And many people would go back and paint that Tweety bird that they were, criticized for in grade 2, because they had to revisit that trauma and have it be accepted before they could actually go on and actually paint something that was relevant to them today. So what stops people is just the way we view art in our culture, that it has to be good instead of expressive, that it has to be something that makes you look good to others instead of just express something honest about yourself, because it's the honest art that is the healing art. It's the honest writing that's the healing writing. And so we're not really encouraged to do that. So people actually do get very scared. Mm-hmm. And because I've taught in all kinds of different settings and different populations, sometimes with spontaneous art, and I've written a couple of courses on facilitating art, I've actually had to sort of like either surprise or delight or kind of shock people into creating creatively, because it's just scary for people. They're afraid that they're not going to be loved if they reveal certain things. So when I was working with kids in jail, I would just I just got more and more wild and bizarre with the art materials that I provided, because it would kind of shock them into creating spontaneously, and I would just like, okay, here's a roll of tinfoil, you got 10 minutes, make a sculpture, go. But otherwise, when I was trying to get them to draw or paint, they were all traumatized, because they didn't come from good homes anyway, and they were just like, oh, no way, unless I'm absolutely perfect at drawing, I'm not going to go there. So to create a safe space for people, even if it's just your own private journal that you don't show anybody, it's just a really nice thing to do for yourself, that whatever I draw today, or whatever I collage today, or whatever I write today, I love myself for that. It's just such a radical act,
And I can imagine that you actually accepting something that is so. When I think about artwork, I think about, it's usually critiqued.
Oh,
You
absolutely. Yes.
So, so now you're creating something that it may be just for you, but it's not going to be critiqued. No one's going to judge it, and it can still, no matter whether it's drawing outside of the lines or just not perfectly drawn, to scale or something, but it's still what
Yeah.
you put together and something that you created, and you can accept it. So when we're learning to accept the things that we create, it's helping us to learn to accept ourselves in a different way too.
Absolutely. And if you can do that in community or in a social group, it's even better. I have a really big course, which is like 100 emails, and it's called 100 Days of Art Journal Therapy. But we
Mhm.
have a private Facebook group where we share our artwork in a very supportive environment. And there's guidelines for that. And some of the guidelines are how it moves you in a emotionally, not saying to someone, because I was traumatized when I first started doing expressive art. I had relatives say to me, that looks like you must be really angry. And I'm like, oh, you're so angry, like in this way that made me just go, you know,
Mhm.
because it felt so good
Mhm.
to do the drawing, but it didn't feel good to have it reflected in that way. So just loving, gentle reflection in a group, just support. It's just still very revolutionary in our culture to share with others, and I love that. I love the it's kind of like doing a redo on your childhood in a way, in a sense, where you can just be really super honest about what you're, and like the purists, they would say, don't say anything at all. Don't, but I myself like the connection through the art making with other people. I've always loved that. And it's always the way I've just innately facilitated my groups.
Mhm.
Yeah.
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 Well, what tips do you have for those watching, to encourage them to get started with incorporating expressive art into their self-care practice?
Well, this is what's really interesting to me. And, we all have our niche, right? We all have our way. So I've been a very busy woman, a busy mother. And I realized 10 years ago that people actually don't know what to create every day, or they don't have a spark, and so I love creating sparks. Like, I have a course that's just, 45 image sparks for art journaling, and I give people ideas every day. So if you don't feel like you can hold on to a practice just yourself every day, because I have no problem coming up with a different mandala every day, but some people do.
Mhm.
And so I have free courses and very reasonably priced courses on just writing sparks or image sparks or art journaling sparks. You can buy books that have sparks, but just, something to give you that impetus to just do a little bit of something every day that's just a little bit outside of your box, not too scary, just sort of safe. But if you climb out of your box a little bit tiny more every day, it's just your life expands. And I think spontaneous creativity as a self-care practice is really just that. It's just like, how am I just going to be a little bit more creative today? Just think a little bit more outside of my mental box. And
Mhm.
so that's where the inspiration comes in. And then that's all of a sudden where you feel like, oh, I'm a little bigger than I thought. I'm a little more capable than I thought, because I came into these practices feeling really scared of my strength, of my ability to make a living. And I think it was really my daily practices where I started to see myself in way larger ways than other people were actually seeing me. So I wasn't having I didn't have like, you know, oh, you're a brilliant, creative, light kind of mirrors in my life back then, And so my artwork just kind of provided me with this beautiful visual mirror of, ah, oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And, because whatever you create is a part of you. And if it inspires you, good on you. That's inside of you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Shelley. It's been a real pleasure just talking to you, listening to your story, and hearing you share a lot of the tips that you have shared. So is there anything else that you want to touch on before you leave?
Um, I think I just love, I loved meditating on self-care for this chat with you. Um, I guess the one thing I want to say is that, we've been kind of talking about a little bit on the theme of inauthenticity, which really kind of has us working hard, and authenticity, which has us kind of working inspired and smart and, more in a more grounded and embodied way. So maybe I'll just leave you with kind of an embodiment piece. Like we talked about, being outside, being in the air, remembering that whatever visions we have, they do need to ground onto this earth. And no matter how hard we're working, if we're taking these ideas and just working hard with them, but we're not putting our feet in the earth, if we're not sleeping enough, if we're not recharging, they're not going to embody on this earth. So I really need embodiment piece, I think, is, that up, coming down, grounding to the earth, but also remembering that, I don't know if this is the same for everybody, but I do experience the sort of my authenticity. It kind of lives behind my heart, like in the middle of my body. And so just kind of following that guidance for inspiration, because a lot of what times when we're working hard, we'll notice that where our energy is out front of us looking for approval, like you'll feel it, it's way out in front instead of way back inside deep in our body. So if you can work from that sort of seed of the soul that lives behind our human heart and feel what that feels like, because many times I would be so busy and I'd be like working. And then I'd realize my energy was way out here. And I'd be like, so it's kind of this feeling like I am enough, when you're inside your body, you're in your core, especially sort of in the middle of your sort of your heart chakra, we'll call it, So it's kind of, I guess, a good question to ask yourself is like, what would I create right now today if I felt like I was enough, if I had enough, if I wasn't worried about the future, if I felt like I was perfectly enough as I am, what would I do today, And that's where all the inspiration comes from, because we create a lot from this sense of not enough. And that's not working smart, and that's working too hard. And I can tell you, a lot of the things that I've created from that not enough place, they're just not even relevant anymore. Like I don't even use them. Yeah. So they were just a process of me creating from not enough. So a lot of the not enough creations, they really don't have relevance in the long term. But when you're creating inspired, like I always love to tell this story that my greatest e-course and my greatest work came from the 100 Days of Art Journal Therapy. I never thought it was going to be a course, and now it makes me my full-time living, because I was working from inspiration, and it was like all I had was this inspiration. You're going to write 100 art journal prompts. I was like, what? That came into my mind at work, but oh my God, the idea started flowing, and I workshopped them for years, gave them away for free for years, used them with clients. And then when it came time that the art studio lost its funding, it was like, turn this into a course. And so I transcribed it all to email, and now it's just like it makes me my living. So and that was not even like I'm gonna work so hard on these 100 prompts, I'm gonna it's gonna make me I had no idea. So that was working inspired, where every day I was on fire, every day I was coming home creating art for the core. I didn't even know it was gonna be a course. For the prompts, it was healing me, it was healing my clients, it was totally in line with what they needed at that time and what I needed, and it was just like bang, 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 bang. And so those are the things that carry that beautiful energy, where you've embodied the passion, you've embodied the inspiration, and it was just fun to do. It wasn't hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful story. I love that. I do. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was good, Shelley. Thanks. And before I forget, is there And before we close up, is there a gift that you were going to leave for the viewers?
Yeah, I just put up a free course called phototherapy, and it was I discussed with you that um, earlier in our talk, just that getting outside on my lunch hour. This was literally birthed at the art studio, getting outside of those four concrete walls
Mm-hmm.
on my lunch hour, and it was during a period of grieving, actually, but it was also a time when I needed to recognize myself as beauty and as beautiful. And so I was actually going through a lot of heavy emotions at the time, and I was busy. This was near the end of my art studio time, and so my private practice was already, it was almost like a full-time thing as well. So it was like that's what happens for entrepreneurs, right? Like you've got the two full-time jobs at a certain point before you make the transition. So I literally, like when I got home, there was no art making involved. Like I had to get right into clients and so on,
Right.
and writing and all of that. And so being ever devoted to having this daily practice, I was like, well, I'm just going to take a photo a day. I'm going to go for a walk and I'm going to take a photo a day. And because I love imagery so much, and I think people who really consciously go for a beautiful self-care walk and look for something beautiful, they will find, I sure did, that beauty starts to speak to you, and you start to photograph in themes. So I started to notice that my photos, they started out sort of with decay and loss and bare trees. And I was like, and whether I took one photo or three photos, they were all sort of on the same emotional theme. And I was able to start to read the emotions in the themes of my photographs. And so it was a very, very deep healing practice, very good for any kind of busy woman who's going to be watching this. And it just tells a little story of how I healed with my mom, which uh, I I started the practice after she passed away from cancer. So, and there was a lot of unfinished business between us. And so it was really a beautiful, beautiful practice of me learning to see myself as beautiful, and by witnessing beauty on the outside and contemplating it and enjoying my photos, every day. So that's what I'm going to offer.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Shelley, for coming and participating and sharing so much of yourself with us today.
You're welcome, Egypt. Thank you. It's been great.
Thank you. And I'll talk to you soon.
All right, love.
Bye-bye.
Bye.